data copied into Google Sheets. What we're going to do is we're going to look at how we're going to manipulate it and analyze it and do some calculations for this lab. The first thing that I'm going to go down here where it says Sheet 1, and I'm going to click on this little arrow here. When I do that, then I'm going to rename what this sheet is called, and I'm simply going to call it raw data. And I'm not going to really touch this for the rest of the time because I want it to stay as it is. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back here and I'm going to duplicate that. And now I have a second sheet of the exact same thing, and I'm going to rename. So this is where we're going to do our work. Now, you can toggle back and forth. It's not going to look any different, but once we start dealing with the organized data, you'll see the difference. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to look at all of this data, and it has all this precision from graphical analysis. And we really don't need that much precision. We're trying to compare a value of 9.81. So really, we're just going to keep our precision to 9.81 or to 2 decimal places. So for the same thing here, we're going to click on this top left here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go to where it says decrease decimal places. And we're going to click on that until all of our data basically has decreased to 2 decimal places. There we go. Went one too far, so then I increase the decimal places. Now, since all my data is highlighted, I'm just going to set up a few things that I like to have. One is my horizontal alignment. I like all of my numbers and writing to be center aligned, so I'm going to have that there. I like all of my vertical alignment to be in the middle, so I'm going to click on that. And then any text that I write, I'm going to need wrapped. So I'm going to click on that. And that's going to set me up for success. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to either highlight that data and I can push delete. I'll highlight this data, push delete, this data, push delete. We could also, if you wanted to, right, there's a little tab here and we could delete the entire column or clear the column. I'm just going to clear it because it's going to help us here in the future for what we're going to do. Then we're going to look at this density as it was falling. So I'm going to rename these that help me understand what each thing is. So this is velocity at bottom photo gate. And in our lab, we are identifying that as our final velocity. So that's going to be V. I'm going to make this V times new. I need to go back to that. And then we're going to put in our units, which is meters per second. Actually, let's put in our uncertainty, which is going to be plus or minus the smallest value. So 0.01 meters per second. So it's going to look like that. And because I have this wrapped already, it doesn't bleed over into the other cell, and it creates that column, cause that column to be thicker. If I didn't have that text wrapping on, it would look something like that, but I want it wrapped on, so it's going to look like that. So that's my velocity at the bottom gate. I'm going to just simply copy and paste this over, and I'm then going to double click and change this. So this is going to be my velocity at the top photo gate, and instead of V, that's going to be U. Now, because that's going to be identical for all the rest of these columns, I'm going to highlight both of these. And the last thing I'm going to do is, because I like bottom to top doesn't really make sense to me, I'm going to highlight this cell. And I'm going to go to where I see a hand, and I'm going to click, and I'm going to grab that, and I'm going to move it over to the left. So that's why we didn't delete that column. We simply cleared that column, and I'm going to do that for all of my columns. So my top velocity, or my initial velocity, is going to be first, and my final velocity is going to be second, as reading from left to right. To do that, I'm going to click, and then I'm going to push Command, and I'm simply going to select the cells that have data in them, and then I'm going to either go to Edit and Copy, or you can do Command C. I'm going to click here then into the cell that I want it to go, and I'm going to go Edit, Paste, or Command V. I'm going to use the shorthanded commands for the. Skip that first one because it's already where I want it. I'm going to hit Cut, Paste, and it brings all those up. I'm going to do that for the remainder of my data points. the button there accidentally. Gates. We have this as H in our lab, and this is going to be plus or minus 0.01 meters. We're going to go back to this H then. I'm going to change it to Times New Roman. I'm going to italicize it. Now I'm going to put my value in here. For this, for mine, it was 0.12. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply copy, select both of those. I'm going to copy. I'm going to paste that above each of those columns. And then I'm going to go back and I'm going to change this to their appropriate values based on my lab. Lastly then is we're going to do our calculations. We're actually going to find acceleration. So in this cell, I'm going to simply write acceleration between photo gates. Plus or minus. I'm going to do 0.8 meters per second squared. Now, this one didn't show up how I wanted it to. So again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to center align that. I'm going to vertical align that in the middle, and then I'm going to wrap my text. And it shows up just like that. Now, we're going to do a calculation. So for our calculation, it's going to be our final velocity squared minus our initial velocity squared divided by 2 times our displacement, which was our h. So I'm going to come thumbs up, and then I'm going to raise that to the 2, because that squares that, minus my initial velocity, so a3, that squares that, and then I'm going to put a bracket or parentheses around both of those. So that's the new fraction, and it's going to be 2 multiplied by the distance in between. And then I'm going to hit enter. And you'll see it has an auto suggestion, which if I click yes, that's fine, but it doesn't really make sense, right? This value is 8.23, and these values are way smaller, and that doesn't really make sense. So one thing I see is I don't want this precision, so I'm going to go here and decrease, again, center align, middle align, and wrap my text. And the reason that is because if you see, this does B3 squared question, it moved every box down by 1. So now I have B4 squared minus A4 squared divided by B2, but I don't want B2. So I'm going to go back up. Means is I want it to always be B1. Because I don't have multiple B values of the distance in between, just a single value, I'm going to put that there. And then I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to find that little circle in the corner. And when I do that, my mouse should become a crosshairs, and then I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to drag it down. And it should then drag down my same equation. And now when I click on all of these, what you'll see is that its all uncertainty is going to be 10% of our calculated value. So if you notice, these values are close to 8. So 10% of that is about 0.8. And so my precision and my calculation has to be to the same place. So I'm going to decrease my decimal place of my calculation by 1. So now I have this to just the tens place, and those are my accelerations. I'm going to do that big, thick line around it to help me break apart which trials go with what. Lastly then, what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the average of all of these values for each distance in between. So I'm going to come down here to B8, and I'm going to put my units in there as plus or minus 0.08, then meters per second squared. For this, I can simply type equals, and then I'm going to, it has a suggestion, but if I didn't have that, I would simply type in average, and then open parentheses, and I can click and drag in the cells that I want. And basically what this means is C3 colon C7 stands for everything in between C3 and C7. Now, the last thing with these two is I'm going to center align, vertical align, and text wrap. And then I'm going to add a box around those as well, just so it's a little bit more identifiable. I like that. So there's my average. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to paste that for all of the rest of my data points. And then the only thing that I would do is I'd go back and change my uncertainty. 0.9 to 9.2, 0.8. Oh, so these should be 0.8. So I'm going to copy and paste that. Fix that real quick. And then this one, 5, 8, and this is 9. Okay. And that's pretty much it. The only thing you could do if you wanted to is you could change kind of the cell size, and so it kind of looks a little bit cleaner, but for the most part, that's how we're going to organize our data. Last thing then is we're going to do a data summary. So I'm going to add a new sheet. I'm going to rename this data summary. And with that, we're going to have distance between photo gates. So let's clean all this up a little bit. Distance between photo gates. We're going to do acceleration in meters per second squared. This is in meters. And this is going to be our percent error. And I can go back to my organized data and put that there. Might be faster in this case just to type them in. These need a little bit more precision. Add that out. My acceleration then is going to be this value. And what's nice about linking them is if these numbers change, so if I made an error, these numbers would change automatically. Let's see. So the last one here. Equals that one. All right, now I'm going to do my percent error, which my percent error is going to be equals my measured value minus 9.81 is my accepted value. Put a parentheses around that. Divided by 9.81 multiplied by 100.